Hello, and welcome to the Bettendorf Public Library's Take Home Workshop. Today, we're going to be making these lovely bowls from fall leaves. In our kit, you'll find, first of all, our leaves. So these are fabric leaves that we purchased. When we got them, they were very, very stiff. They'd been treated with a stiffener of some sort, and so we've already washed them once to soften them up a little bit. They needed to be softer so that they would curve more easily. So you'll have an assortment of fall leaves. You're going to have a balloon that we'll use for a mold for your bowl. You don't have to use the balloon. If you have a bowl or another bowl or some sort of curved surface that you like the shape and size, you can use that instead. In that case, I would recommend putting plastic wrap down over it before you put the leaves on. You're going to have a container of Mod Podge. You could also use watered down plain school glue, plain white school glue, but Mod Podge is great for this sort of thing, and a foam brush to apply your Mod Podge. The only thing you need to supply is a tool to get the balloon out of your bowl when you're done. So you can just use a pin to pop it, a pair of scissors, just anything like that to peel that out. You might also want to add a couple of things. You might want to add something that will help hold your balloon in place while you're working on it. I just have a plastic bowl, an old plastic bowl that we use for mixing paints. I'm going to set my balloon in there to hold it steady. And I've covered my work surface with a little bit of wax paper. Mod Podge is messy, and we're going to be using a fair amount of it. So this will keep it from getting all over and making it on my cutting mat, which is a little bit harder to clean. This I'll just wrap up and throw away when I'm done. The first step, of course, is to blow up your balloon. I don't recommend blowing it all the way up as big as it'll go. It's more likely to pop, obviously. And two, that would make for a very, very large bowl. I don't know if we gave you enough leaves for a bowl that big. So I did it, about the width of my hand. And I'm gonna set it in my bowl with the tail side down to hold it in place. Then I'm gonna give it, starting in the center, a fairly generous coating of Mod Podge. I'm just painting it on there. It goes on white. It will dry clear, of course. Then I'm going to take my first leaf and I'm going to coat that with the Mod Podge as well. And this is where you can see why I would want to put down a protective surface, because that's going to get all over my work area. I'm going to peel that up and lay it down. And I'm going to smooth it down as much as possible. And if I need to, I'm going to do a little bit more Mod Podge here. That to stick as well as we can. And as you go on, you're adding layer and layer, and we're just going to keep doing that same thing. We're going to pretty well saturate our leaves with the Mod Podge. And then we're going to layer them on top of each other. Using the Mod Podge to basically glue these leaves together. Now, your leaves are going to want to curl up at the edges, and that's okay. It adds a little bit of dimension to your final bowl. But at the very bottom, you want that to be relatively flat. I'm going to show you a tip a little later on what we can do if your bowl won't stay upright. But for now, we're going to do our best to keep the bottom of it as smooth as possible, knowing full well that it's not going to be completely smooth. So we're just adding another leaf and brushing as we go. Paying particular attention to the places, those points where the leaves overlap with each other. We want the leaves to stick to each other. When all is said and done, we don't want them particularly to stick to the balloon because the balloon is going to be taken out. It's just a mold. So for my size bowl, I'm only going to use basically like 2 layers of leaves. So I have these 3 in a circle, and then I'm going to put another layer around the edge here. And I'm going to keep doing the same thing. A little bit of Mod Podge on the balloon, saturate my leaf, put the leaf on, move on to the next one. We're going to keep going all the way around like that, and then we let it dry. They have to dry for you want them to be thoroughly dry before you take the balloon out. So depending on how thick your Mod Podge is, as well as a number of other conditions, such as humidity and things of that nature, Mod Podge will dry. Ideally, we would probably leave it overnight. I never like that. I'm too impatient with my crafts. I don't want to have to wait overnight for my results, but I also want them to turn out. You can see the area where I'm working is getting really covered in Mod Podge. I'm going to scoop some of that up so that, because I want my leaf to be saturated, but I don't want there to be big globs of Mod Podge on there, because then when it dries, it'll dry as a big blob, and that is not so attractive. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to get all my leaves in position, then I'm going to go over the whole thing one more time with another coat of Mod Podge and get all these edges to lay down properly and make sure they stay flat, and then I'm going to let that dry. And then we'll come back and take a look. So here you can see I have the original 3 leaves that I stuck down, and then another ring around them, and they're not sticking down very well. What I did was I put them in place and with enough Mod Podge to hold them in place. And now I'm letting this Mod Podge, for the most part, dry, and I'm going to go back in and stick them together a little more thoroughly. I might need to do a little adjustment on some positioning. That's why I'm going back in before it's all the way dry. And I'm going to get these ones to lie down a little bit better. So for me, it's going to take me a couple coats to get everything to lie as smooth as I want to and to stay attached. So even after washing and dryer, some of these leaves are a little stiffer than others, and they really don't want to lie flat. So what I did was I made this bizarre looking concoction. I just got some rubber bands. I got everything down as tightly as I could. I put the rubber bands around it, and I'm going to let this set overnight and let it really, really dry, and come back in the morning and peel these rubber bands off, and I should be able to peel them off without pulling the bowl apart, and I believe we'll be all set and ready to go. Okay, we're back. It's been about 16 hours since we rubber banded this and let it set. So let's peel our rubber bands off and see how it did. Oh, they don't even want to stick that much. I did let the leaves dry as much as possible so they weren't completely soaking. The Mod Podge wasn't completely soaking wet when I put them on, so they are not sticking at all. They're coming off wonderfully. And now it's time. I think that's well and dry, and I like the size and shape. So I'm going to go ahead and get my scissors, and I'm going to pop our balloon and get that out of there. So I'm just going to take, and I'm just going to do a little snip right there and let the air out nice and slow. peeling because it doesn't want to let go. There we go. Here it comes. So you can see we have a lot of the Mod Podge here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull away, just with my fingers, just gently pull away a lot of that excess where I had brushed it onto the balloon but didn't cover it with a leaf. And you can see why this is so effective, because this is pretty strong. I mean, not so strong you can't break with your fingers, but pretty strong. But it's also a little flexible, a little bit stretchy. We're going to do that cleanup all the way around. Might be some parts even down inside. You might want to check your outside. You might have some little spots like this where I got it on really thick, and that is actually too thick to just peel away, but I can go in there and I can trim some of that blob away with my scissors. There we go. Now, if you want to, you could go ahead and you could coat this whole thing one more time. Now that it's holding together so nicely, coat that one more time. I actually like the look of these leaves sticking up like this. And so I would leave it like that and then set that out and put pine cones in, or maybe more fall leaves. Because you could also, if you don't really like the look of this Mod Podge in here, you could also line it with leaves and give it another layer, make it a little stronger, but fill it up with something decorative. Now this one, and this is an effect too of the rubber bands, it gave it kind of a flat bottom so it sits nicely. If it doesn't, cut out a little circle of plastic from a Tupperware lid that you were going to discard or recycle. Just a little 2-inch disc and just glue it on the bottom. And then you've got a solid base for it to sit on. But there is your leaf bowl, ready for fall, and to just display whatever decorative items you might want to display in that. Show us your work on social media. We'd love to see it. And we want to thank the Friends of the Bettendorf Public Library for sponsoring our take-home workshop.